My name is Janelle Wong. Public transit is incredibly important to me. It's also important, I know that I'm an active transportation and safe streets, but public transportation is absolutely part of that. So we're gonna start by introducing the panelists, and then I'll do some opening remarks and then we'll get started. Okay, so we have this evening, it's not gonna go in order the way they're seated, but it's here on my sheet, so it'll make it easier for me. I'd like to welcome Amanda Eaken. She serves as the chair of the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency Board, overseeing policy and strategy, and the $1.4 billion annual budget for the 7th largest transit system in the United States. She was previously the director of transportation at the Natural Resources Defense Council, and she led national efforts to promote equitable mobility. Eaken also co-directed Bloomberg Philanthropies 100+ million American cities climate challenge, helping 25 cities exceed Paris Climate Agreement targets. Recognized with numerous leadership awards, she holds a master's degree in city and regional planning from UC Berkeley and a bachelor's degree in ecology and environmental studies from Dartmouth. And she lives in San Francisco here with her family. So welcome, Amanda. Next, we have Maria Lombardo. Thank you, welcome. She was appointed Chief Deputy Director for the San Francisco County Transportation Authority in 2004. Ms. Lombardo is responsible for overseeing the agency's regional policy team, providing strategic policy input for internal and external initiatives, and managing the board and community advisory committee processes. She also has nearly 3 decades of experience with the agency and is proud to have played a lead role in development of 3 successful revenue measures, which I have happily promoted over the years. So thank you, including the 2022 reauthorization of the Proposition L sales tax. So welcome, thank you so much. Unfortunately, this evening, Shia French could not, was not available. They are not tonight, but she sends her regards. But she was gonna say her background. She's been organizing for the transportation and housing justice for people with disabilities and seniors the past 8 years. And they are currently working on campaigns to repair elevators at SFMTA and BART stops and to get more bus shelters across the city. So we will be in touch with them in the future. We certainly like to keep a connected relationship with the Senior and Disability Action. Next this evening, we have Rick Laubscher. Thank you. He is the president and CEO of the Market Street Railway and the museum just down the street. So if nobody has ever gone there, they should absolutely go there and check it out. One of America's leading historic transit preservationist organizations, a 4th generation San Franciscan. Rick has been involved in transit matters for decades as a broadcast journalist, a public affairs executive, and is an ongoing advocate for better transit. Rick led the effort to bring vintage streetcar service back to Market Street in the early 1980s. Resulting in the F line between the Castro and Fisherman's Wharf. In short terms, if you haven't ridden the boat tram, please go and ride it. You can also rent it for parties, just in case everyone does. So there you go, Rick, little plug.
We don't get anything from that.
That's okay, that's okay. It's still lots of fun. It's still lots of fun. In 2023, he led a series of civic celebrations for the 150th anniversary of the invention of the cable cars. And he has written extensively on the San Francisco transit history and operations, including On Track, a field guide to San Francisco's historic streetcars and cable cars. So thank you for being here this evening, Rick. Last but not least, Chanell Fletcher, thank you so much for being here this evening. She's currently the Deputy Executive Officer of Equity, Communities, and Environmental Justice at the California Air Resources Board, otherwise known as CARB, in January of 2021. She leads CARB's Environmental Justice and Community Air Protection Program, developing policies to address disproportionate impacts of air pollution and climate change on communities of color in California. Fletcher is the executive lead for the AB 617 and focuses on building community-based partnerships in environmental and racial justice. So thank you so much for being here this evening. Can we give a round of applause to all the panelists? So I, again, want to thank everybody for participating this evening. I know in real life has challenges, but thank you so much for being here in person. We deeply appreciate it. So this evening, what we're going to talk about in general is about the future of public transit. But as many of you are aware, our public transit system, both regionally and locally, is facing a large deficit as early as 2026, possibly sooner. Transportation leadership, both locally and regionally, are thinking about how to solve these issues and there are definitely ideas on the table. This fiscal cliff is real and this fiscal cliff is real, and not solving it will lead to significant change to service that disproportionately affects under-resourced communities across the Bay Area. Keeping this in mind, we want to talk about this evening what our vision is of public transit. What should it look like in the future? And what kind of sustainable future for our cities and communities and our planet? So keep all those things in mind. We will have Q&A at the end, but most of the questions will be directed at the panelists about the future of transit. So let's get started. All right. We are on track. Ooh, I'm ahead. Woo-hoo. All right. Let's start off with Rick. The first topic we're going to start with is basically, where have we been? History of transit and innovation in San Francisco. So Rick, your question is, we will be talking a lot about the future of transit in San Francisco, including new ways we can innovate to meet our mobility and climate goals. How have San Francisco's historical innovations in transit shaped the city into the present day?
They were everything. Starting with the cable cars 150 years ago, that was high tech. Nothing like that had ever been done. If you wanted to get around town, you got on a cart led by a horse. And horses had all kinds of side effects that people don't talk about today, but including health. Cable cars went twice as fast. They made the labor costs amortize over much different distance. And remember, all of transit at that time was privately owned, for profit. And transit got started here when a man named Thomas Hayes built a subdivision on a street he named for himself, and then built a horse car line to take people out to his property. Not long after that, the cable cars came in, driven by magnates like Leland Stanford and the other Central Pacific Railroad people, partly to serve their own mansions on Nob Hill, but also to open up areas farther west where, there was room for development. Same thing happened when Muni came in, the first publicly owned transit system in America in 1912. Almost immediately, public investment started with a tunnel under Stockton Street to allow streetcars, not automobiles, to reach the Panama Pacific International Exposition in Harbor View, now the Marina. Right after that, we had Twin Peaks Tunnel, which was actually paid for by property owners who wanted to cash in and develop their property in areas like Forest Hill, West Portal, places like that. And then the Sunset Tunnel, where the Judah runs now and ran then, starting in 1928. All of these places were part of city policy to open up undeveloped areas of the city to largely residential use. And so those innovations, first public transit agency, a technology that came to be used all over the world until it was quickly eclipsed by the electric streetcar. All of these were things that shaped the very shape of our city. For example, if you go up Castro Street, Castro Street itself between, let's say, 18th and Noe Valley 24th, you'll notice that the houses there are about a decade older than the houses on either side. Why? Because the cable car line came from the ferry building all the way out Market and over the hill to Noe Valley, and that made that property really desirable. Today, transit lines are really helpful. A lot of people don't like to live on them. They like to live close, but not on. But you can see the visual evidence of how transit developed San Francisco. So a question that I hope we take up later is, how do we apply these lessons learned, our own experience, to make smart investments for the future?
Thank you so much, Rick. That's amazing. I wish I had a cable car that went to my house. Just saying, I live off the El Terrible, so I kind of have a cable car, but it's a really big trip. Our next question is for Chanell. You've heard a lot of talk about the innovation. Use that in air. We're going to put that in air quotes during this panel. But I want to address that innovation can be a charged word for a lot of people. This city has a history of doing some things in the name of, quote, innovation that end up coming back to hurt certain communities. How have historical transportation decisions or innovations affected our progress towards environmental and racial justice? And second question, what can we gain by orienting our transit system towards justice and equity?
I want to answer that. I just want to say 3 things before I do. I like the number 3, by the way, so I'll reiterate 3 a lot. So 1, thank you guys all so much for having me. I'm an interloper. I'm actually from the East Bay, but I know, but I love San Francisco. So thank you for having me here. 2, I was gonna say, this is awesome because I'm on a panel with Amanda. And if you saw me whispering with Amanda, it's because way back when I was just getting involved in this work, Amanda was on our steering committee at Climate Plan. So it's very full circle because she knew me like when I was just like, wait, what are we talking about? So it's very awesome to be here.
Yeah.
I will take the mic. There we go. Is that better?
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Awesome. So I wanted to say that piece there. And then the last point that I wanted to say is that it's just really awesome to see everyone here in person. I feel like after being virtual for so long, it's really nice to have in-person spaces like this. So again, thank you all so much. Okay, so to actually answer the question, and I'm gonna build off of what Rick had shared about the lessons learned I think are important. I think some of the things in innovation, and I'm kind of assuming in some ways that everybody here is a little bit of like a transit land use planning scholar, but if not, it's cool, like we can roll with that too. I think one of the things that I think about a lot is I think about urban renewal, which happened in the 70s as one of the things that was like, oh my God, this is great. All that like neighborhood blight, all those slum neighborhoods, the best thing that we can do, just get rid of it, right? And so if you look at like the Fillmore, for example, in the city, that's a place where you can see the impacts of urban renewal, right? And it was done in the spirit of like, we're gonna get rid of these like, you know, blighted neighborhoods, these slum neighborhoods, we're gonna make it better. But what we ended up doing, right, is displacing, you know, hundreds of people, particularly people of color, people that look like me, from their homes, from their communities, and completely changing, right, the composition and the culture and losing actually that culture. So that's one thing that you could point to, right, where you're talking about innovation, and yet I think it actually creates a lot of harm. I think one of the other things that I was thinking about is highways. I spend a lot of time talking about highways, and one of the most provocative articles that I read recently in NPR was that one of our biggest monuments to racism actually is highways. And so, as I mentioned before, from the East Bay, but one of the things that I think every time that I happen to like, you know, be on like I-980, right, is you look at how that splits West Oakland from downtown. And if you ever tried to walk from West Oakland to downtown, it is a miserable walk because you're walking over this huge highway infrastructure. And that's a story across, the nation, right? There's so many stories of how this, you know, wow, this great new shiny highway, we're gonna build it and it's gonna be even better for who? Who is it gonna be better for? Who benefits? Who loses from that? And what we have seen is that there are a number of communities that have really just been torn apart by highways, so much so that now we're seeing this huge effort coming from the federal government around how do we actually reconnect these communities. So those are, I think I would just say kind of like 2 clear examples, right? Where, you know, whether it's in the 50s and the 70s, I mean, even now you can point to places where we're like, oh, we've got this new great innovative idea, and what it actually is doing is harming because we're not really consciously centering environmental justice, we're not centering equity. And I'm only smiling when I use that word because I just talked to my friend Jaime and he was like, you know, there's a lot of people that are using the word equity, but what does that even really mean, right? And that's a whole other conversation. But to answer the question, some of the other things that I would just flag from the state level, because at the California Air Resources Board, what we're charged with is looking at the statewide, thinking about how do we get to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and how do we clean up the air. And transportation, if you know anything about the climate space, is a huge part of our greenhouse gas emissions. Specifically light duty vehicles, right? So we're looking at that intensely and thinking about what does it take for us to reduce how much we're traveling by car. As much as we've done on climate, and I feel like we have done a fair amount, we're still seeing a huge disproportionate amount of the funding still going to highways, especially when you compare it to transit. We still see things that like, there's about 60% of the population that can't even walk to what they need to get to. And when you're looking at it by race, the longest commute times are for people of color, specifically Black people, when they're taking public transit. And I think when you're looking at who doesn't have access to a car, you're looking at over 40% of people of color don't have access to a car, right? So we're continuing to invest more and more funding into a structure that doesn't actually center and or benefit all communities, right? I think that part of the question was, right, like what do we gain by orienting our transit systems towards justice and towards equity? I'm gonna take a little bit of a tangent, but you mentioned active transportation, so I'm gonna take it there. I'm gonna loop it back, I hope. And I won't take credit for this, this came from Policy Link, but it was called the curb cut effect, right? And so the idea is that if you're walking on the sidewalk and you see that kind of like ramp, right? That you take, whether you're biking, whether you got strollers, like in my case, I have a 1-year-old, so I am on the strollers a lot, right? But it's just easy, right? It's like, you know, if you have like groceries and you're pulling them, there's a million reasons why the curb cut is a great thing, right? But it really came from a lot of push specifically for those who had wheelchairs who were like, we're trying to move and we cannot because it's really hard because there's no cut on the curb. I think of the work that we're talking about with transit in the exact same way, right? The things that we're talking about in terms of like what it looks like to start taking a lot of our state funding and really thinking about how we shift that and invest that in transit and invest that into what we know is going to benefit, particularly communities of color, low communities, that's going to result in benefits for everyone. Imagine like, I mean, and in San Francisco, like you probably have it better across the state than others, but it's still not great, right? And I think that the idea here from us at the state level is like, imagine if there really was that seamless transportation option all the time that didn't result in you having to drive anywhere. And that's not just a benefit for those that don't have a car, that's a benefit for all of us. And so I think that's really when we're talking about centering equity and justice, you really do see the results magnified across the entire population.
Thank you so much for that. So many things, so many good nuggets there. Thank you so much. The next one is about transit first policy, and the next question is for Maria. One area of innovation is SF transit first policy, San Francisco's transit first policy as a city, which celebrated its 50th anniversary last year. Why is the transit first policy so important, and how has it guided our city's transportation work over the half century that has been around?
Thank you, and Chanell, thanks for coming and for giving me another transit trip so I can be much better in the transit trip contest. Very tough competition. Also, I'm always loving on these panels because I learned so much from everybody else. I think and also answer this one better than I, but many of you look like you probably weren't born when transit first policy was put on the books. But let me just say, it may sound kind of like a duh, but the priority for movement of people and goods first, rather than over private vehicles, this was way, way ahead of its time. And thank goodness it was in place in 1973-ish. I'm gonna do world's fastest history, not as elegant as Rick, but the 80s in San Francisco was crazy, crazy time of development right after BART had started. And if the city had not had that policy, this place might look like LA or something like that. It's pretty hard, Sky Hills. But that policy, which covered everything from focusing on moving transit first, making bicycles, pedestrian travel desirable and attractive, limiting loosely, got better at that over time, the number of parking spaces, recognizing the importance of regional transit. All of that is what enabled San Francisco to become the job center really for the Bay Area. We could not have done that. You all know that one of the pluses of being at the top of a peninsula, we've got a bunch of bridges which naturally meter, traffic to and from. And those bridges, hit capacity. And those of you might have seen this neat little graphic that BART has of it's got the Bay Bridge and it's got BART running underneath. And I wish I could remember the numbers. Maybe some of you can, but during like peak hour, pre-pandemic, still probably now, BART was carrying you see that, I remember the numbers, like twice as many people through as in cars. And that's, transit's not back to full ridership yet, but the traffic on the bridge pretty much is. and we couldn't have managed like that. I do want to point out San Francisco relative to the other places, even just in the Bay Area, is very different because of the transit first policy. So Martin, Martin there, works with me at the TA. We do a lot of stuff on the funding and regional policy side, and we're often comparing those little pie charts of how each county uses its transportation money. And to what Chanell said, you look at most of those pie charts, and the biggest piece of the pie is highway projects typically. Streets might get mixed in there. And then they come to San Francisco and they're like, yeah, because we're the complete opposite. Most, because of the transit first policy, most of the money that we have for transportation has been invested into transit, primarily Muni, but also in more recent years, more and more of that also to BART and Caltrain. And that's one of the things I'm just so proud of working here. This is so fun. Our biggest line item for expenditure at the Transportation Authority that oversees the half-cent sales tax and some other state federal funds that funnel through. The single biggest line item in all of our plans has been purchasing and maintaining new vehicles for Muni, because without, safe vehicles that are reliable and actually show up when you're waiting there, there's no transit service. And to me, that's always been like the single most important thing you can do to improve transit service is keep those vehicles well maintained. Thank you, Amanda, for doing that. Now we recently just helped purchase a bunch of the new BART cars, yay. Just a couple of factoids to toss out there, and then food for thought for the next section is one piece of sort of evidence of how impactful the transit first policy has been. If you look at daily vehicle miles traveled for San Francisco County versus the other 9 Bay Area counties, we just rocket. We're at, I think this is a 2020 stat, MTC's website. We're about 6.6 daily vehicle miles traveled. The next closest county, Santa Clara, is at 17.6. So not only should we be proud we've made our city walkable, transit accessible, we are also helping the entire region reach our climate goals by reducing greenhouse gases. And all of our pollution flows over that way, where I live. Full disclosure, so that's very helpful. The last thing I wanted to toss out, transit first hasn't just been transit, it has also been something I think that inspired city leaders and MTA working on things like the bicycle plan, the better streets policy, which was sort of a forerunner to what's now called, I know we have a room full of transportation laws, like complete streets type work. It seems like San Francisco is sort of always ahead of the game, and then MTC, which is sort of the regional planning body, then adopts those policies for the region. But so the last beat I want to plant for the other questions is talking a little bit about innovation. For me, maybe a better word, I don't know, is about being flexible and keeping your core values focused. So transit first, while we've had it for 50 years, what it's looked like on the ground has continued to change. We haven't always got it right the first time, but it started out doing things like I remember this, it was like a one block transit lane, like on Samson or something with white paint. That was big stuff. And now we're at Van Ness, red carpets, bus rapid transit in the middle. So I've been through probably 3 or 4 different signalized systems that don't still work really well. we'll get there. And yeah, I just want to kind of keep that thought of me, like flexibility and evolving over time, but keeping front and center who you are serving. And leaving you with a very obvious statement, but I think one that is so important is if the pandemic did nothing else, one of the things it did was just underscore how transit in particular is an essential, kind of redundant, essential lifeline though for so many people. And those are the people we need to be thinking about as we're trying to figure out how to make transit better for the future.
Thank you so much, Maria. We're going to move on to the next subject, which is where are we going, and how do we get to that transit first city or continue that policy and make it stronger? So the first question is about improving transit, and it's for Amanda. In a perfect world, what does the future of public transit look like in San Francisco?
Okay, great. I want to also just say thank you to all of you for being here because there's a lot of competition for tonight for your attention. I saw John Mulaney on Market Street. There's a mayoral debate tonight. Tonight is back to school night.
We were
I saw
scheduled
Bob
for
the drag queen. So the fact that you're here means a lot, and it gives me a lot of hope that you are here over all those other fun things because you care so much about transit. And I've got a lot of assignments and asks for all of you all for supporting the future of transit. So I'm really, really pleased to be here with you all. Couple things I want to say about this. In terms of the vision of transit going forward, we have a vision at Muni. The Muni Ford vision is essentially a 5-minute service network of about 12 transit routes that serve about 2/3 of our ridership. And at those 12 routes, what's that 5-minute network? The buses or the trains never stop unless they're stopping at a bus stop or a train stop. So that's really simply the vision. There is a map of it. I could show you if we had a slideshow. But kind of think about like there's routes going all over the city, but kind of north-south routes, some east-west routes, curving routes that basically covers most of our ridership. And what I want to say in terms of Maria's point about resiliency and flexibility, I don't know if you all know this, but during the pandemic, we went from 74 routes, almost overnight, we had to redesign the entire transit system in San Francisco because of operator shortages and responding to demand. So it went from 74 to 19 routes, like overnight, 19 core routes, based on the data of where people were still going. Pre-pandemic, we were at like 700,000 daily trips. It shrunk, and there's a lot of, oh, everyone's staying at home. Well, no, they're not. There were 100,000 people every single day during the height of the pandemic, when some of us who had privilege to like stay home and do our jobs were still moving. And we had to redesign and regenerate to serve those core trips. So to me, that's like the future of transit is flexible and is resilient. But the idea that you don't wait more than a few minutes for those core systems. Secondly, I want to take all the friction out of paying for or understanding how to pay for transit. This is still a little bit of a barrier for people like, well, is it $2.50, is it $3, or in cash? Like, I still am amazed that I kind of spend time with some friends who are like, oh, wow, how do I pay? Like, what does it cost? So we're working towards just credit card payment, pay with your Apple Pay. We're not quite there yet, part of those MTC conversations. But want to take all of the friction, just make that super, super seamless, safe. Want to make sure everyone feels safe everywhere as part of the transit system, on the transit vehicles, at the stations, waiting at the stops. That's a really important part of it. Another piece I want to say is this. As you heard, we are facing a very, very significant fiscal cliff coming up. And this is getting to be like a little bit of a pattern. It's like, oh no, it's another crisis of transit funding. And in my perfect world, like we are permanently funded, we are good, we've got a lot of money in the bank, and we have permanently solved the structural funding challenges of Muni. So there's a Muni funding working group right now that Janelle is serving on, some other great folks that are tackling this, but to me, we cannot be in a perpetual state of funding crisis around Muni. That's not the vision. We get backup from our state government, we get backup from our federal government, and we realize that investing in Muni is investing core in the city, in climate, in equity, in just everyday lives and independence and freedom for all kinds of people. And then finally, I want to say there is an element of joy and character in my ideal world, a vision of transit. I really love what you said, Rick, about the history of Muni. I find that of the 6,000 people that work for SFMTA, there are deep, deep roots of connection. We honored a woman at our board meeting this week whose grandfather was Curtis Green, the first Black general manager of a transit agency around the world. So she has been working for generations in this agency and played an incredible role actually connecting a girl who had been lost from her family for 4 days, and she was actually able to just reunite that girl with her family. So I love that sense of both personal connection to place, connection to community, but also all of our historic vehicles and the boat tram and all of the ways in which uni and transit can create joy and connection in the city. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think, we'll be doing some hard work in the next couple of months, so we'll have more to share on that. But yes, thank you. Joy is absolutely the center of all of this. Maria, the next question is for you. I'm sorry, I have to put my glasses on. This is terrible. Sorry. The CTA has the tough task of helping to ensure that all transit projects that San Francisco needs are adequately funded. How do we make sure that happens? And especially as we hear the news of the budget deficit that Amanda just referred to at BART and Muni, what innovations are happening in the world of transit funding?
Right. This might be very short.
It's no secret, right? We just need money.
Exactly. I'm watching White House Spanish before she with my daughter. They just print their own. So first, a couple of things I'll try to say about the Uni Funding Working Group, some of the comments there, other places I've been just would really make me rethink how we approach the funding, although I kind of feel like everything old is new again, and innovation is, if we can get the support and we do it, then it's innovating and it works. We'll see. For a couple of things for context, I know just so important there, and I'm listening to people around the Bay as we were trying to do a regional measure, and there are very, very different perspectives on the importance of transit and who should pay and how you should pay around the region. One of the things that someone said that I thought was just a really great reminder is, public transit is a government service and it's not meant to make a profit. And especially in San Francisco, you guys all know this, we subsidize the cost of a ride because your core demographic are lower income persons in particular, and they can't afford it and they shouldn't have to pay the full thing. And the choice riders, the ones who aren't all back yet, they can afford to pay, and that's a key part of the revenue service. Okay. Thank you. So that's very important to keep in mind as part of the funding solution. Is not that things aren't being run well, it's because this is a public service and public good with equity, environment, economic vitality, all of those benefits that everyone mentioned before. So the deficit is ginormous. I keep hearing about it, but just the latest numbers, Martin is actually gonna open up a presentation at the Transportation Authority Board on Tuesday, where BART, Caltrain, and MTA folks are gonna talk about their financial outlook and transit recovery. And their deficits, just for scale, for BART right now, really starting in 2026, as Janelle mentioned, hovering around the $350 million a year will be their operating deficit. And this is, as you all know, primarily because people are working from home and not traveling as much. I think something like 72% of BART's riders are back, they're just not coming back 5 days a week. For perspective, and not that I'm pushing a sales tax, it's just easy to calculate. To cover BART's deficit, that's about a 0.36 to 0.45% sales tax increase if you just use the 3 BART counties, Alameda, Contra Costa, San Francisco. Caltrain's deficit, smaller, but it's gonna get up to like 77 million in a few years. And then MTA has a range, which makes sense because we're just guessing what's going to recover how quickly, is about say $250 to $280 million a year. That's about 0.6 to a 1.43% sales tax for you to do that. In San Francisco, because we get served by everybody, you can imagine we certainly cannot afford that much of a sales tax increase, and that'd be hitting our demographic hard. So let me try to get to some of the innovations real quickly that are happening. As difficult as the conversations have been around the Bay, it has been enlightening to hear like some of the smaller operators that serve in the North Bay or in Contra Costa or whatnot recognize that the health of Muni and BART in particular affects their health. They serve a lot of their core communities, but they do have a huge chunk of ridership that is, taking people to and from their systems. They sound like a small step forward, but in negotiating of who pays, that's pretty enormous. I think just two other thoughts, but I don't have an easy answer, but I do think this is a absolutely historic moment. It is an emergency, but I don't want to sell it as an emergency. It's a historic moment where transit has to make a paradigm shift in how we finance and we become stable. And it is kind of a good thing because it means we need to be less fare dependent. So if we can find an equitable funding source, that has real promise in my mind. I've also heard recently, something that I know is that most of the states in the US that have robust transit systems have a much more significant contribution from the state towards transit operations. We have anti-transit operations built into our state constitution for some reason. That is something that I feel like momentum is growing to really push the state to try and help contribute. The last thing, which is a little bit innovative, but it's also old is new again, is in addition to different sort of property or sales tax or whatever, payroll taxes, things that are tossed around, a lot of you may have heard of this idea that MTC has been pushing of trying to mandate certain large employers in areas well served by transit to have to buy a transit pass for their employees. Kind of like the idea of funding the universal pass that everybody could use. That the math would work on that because you have enough people paying into the system that the price can be lower and transit operators don't lose money. Employers are happy, employees get a lovely perk. Gonna be a huge lift. I hope you're all out there advocating when we do it. But the reason I say everything is old is new again, I just want to give a shout out to like the people who make these things happen. In 2016, SFSU had a Uni Pass class pass type thing for students already. And thank goodness to the leadership there, folks at BART, Senator Wiener, MTC, and we got, I think it was BART's first class, or like discounted pass like this that we helped throw in a little bit of money where the SFSU students voted to pay part of their student fees towards these passes that gave them an unlimited muni monthly pass. And initially it was like a 25% discount on trips that started or ended at Daly City, which is the closest one to SFSU. And they kept a little reserve of funds and they found out over time they had enough money left that they could change that to a 50% discount on our trips for their students. So that is like the idea of the Universal Bay Area Pass. I'll just note SFSU was a perfect guinea pig because they knew exactly where their students were coming from, how many days per week, and there was like one BART station. So it was a lot easier to figure out the math. We just got, that's why we're highlighting the beta test now, is trying to figure out that math. But, so I'm sorry, I don't have any easy answers, but I think like a crisis is a terrible thing to raise, and this is the new time to make that big pivot.
I would agree. I would agree with that. I mean, I think that the, also just as an aside, like the youth program for Muni, like free Muni for youth has been transformative. As a parent of teenage children from middle school, the plan started in middle school through high school. I mean, they have to take it. They take it to get to places, it builds independence, it does all these things. And we need to have more programs that think more holistically. Like the college one, I know our organization would like to do that for City College here in San Francisco and figuring out a way to fund that as well, so that that's part of their experience at City College. So these are all great things. So a mind shift is definitely what needs to happen, maybe at the state level, maybe not. We here in San Francisco or in the Bay Area, maybe are more mindful of that. All right, the next question is for Rick. I think it's safe to say that you love public transit. I mean, you got, is it two boat trams? How many historical, three?
Three boat trams.
Three boat trams.
About a dozen other cars.
And those are from the UK, is that not correct?
Yes.
Yes, so they came on a boat. They're called the boat tram, but they traveled here by container, right, to get here? So it's safe to say that you love public transit. In order to make the changes we want to see, we need a lot of people and a lot of voters to love transit. How do we promote the joy of transit among riders and non-riders alike? Are there any lessons from Muni's history that could be helpful today as the agency faces a budget deficit?
Well, we have some real advantages, and I want to take a second to give recognition to Amanda and her board, and to Jeff Tumlin and Julie Kirschbaum for wanting to talk about the joy of public transit. First of all, most people just want public transit to be clean and safe, and to get you where you want to go in a predictable manner. Muni right now has one of the newest fleets in the nation, thanks to the hard work of Maria and Amanda, everybody get that money. So it's a big improvement over what we used to have. And I remember a lot of those years that were really bad. And Curtis Green, who I knew very well, was a wonderful man. And the first bus driver, the first operator to become general manager in San Francisco, and the first Black general manager in America. So we have a lot of examples of things we've done that are positive and are going to be seen by a lot of communities as positive. And I know when people see the boat car or some of the cable cars, you know, the other things, we have things nobody else has. So that's a start. You also have to, I think, teach people, or at least lead people, and I think many of you are in this category already, you know, to truly enjoy using public transit to get around town and spread the word. It's kind of a viral thing. You know, people are always quick to talk about a bad event, even though it's very isolated. And of course, we have to do everything we can to keep things safe. But in passing that joy along is you know, using social media, using you know, just your face-to-face communications with colleagues and friends is extremely important. And also feeding back to the agencies so that they know what you think is good and what you think is not so good. There are professional commenters who, Amanda knows these, yes, every meeting, you know, and that's fine, that's their right to do. But when I know people in authority hear new voices that they haven't heard with thoughtful comments, they get paid attention to. And we got a lot of tough decisions to make at Muni about our route structure and fares and all that other stuff. And if you make positive comments, I don't mean apologias for their mistakes, but positive comments about the things that are going right, how you want to see more of them, and how you want to correct the things that aren't so good. That's very positive. On top of that, I think it's up to the business community. I also serve as the board chair of the Union Square Foundation, which helps the Union Square Alliance in providing art and music and other area enhancements to our beleaguered retail core, which is starting to come back, trust me. And there again, we have the cable cars, we have Market Street, we have fabulous architecture, historic architecture to build on there. And finally, the best thing that I think is a great connector now is in the wake of the pandemic, we have so many more community events that we never had before. You know, night markets, festivals, we're gonna have downtown entertainment zones very quickly and other places. Use public transit to get there because you don't want to be driving a car, especially after you've been in a downtown entertainment zone.
Yeah.
But you have the opportunity, and community has the opportunity to become kind of a fun way to get from here to there. So, you know, I think that's the way to spread the joy, is just be optimistic and look for the positive.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you, Rick. Chanel, the next question is for you. How can public transit advocates and professionals better relate their work to environmental justice? And why is making the connection between public transit and environmental justice important?
So much to say. I did not know that John Mulaney was here, by the way.
One night only.
One night only, did not know that. I was like, oh, wow. Okay, a couple of thoughts. I think on the piece around relating the work to environmental justice, I think that that's intrinsic to public transit, right? So like history lesson, civil rights, right? 1960s, 1950s, what kicks it off? Anyone? Buses, right? Montgomery, yeah, it wasn't like a gotcha moment, right? It was like Montgomery bus boycott, right? Right, and I mean, so I bring that up because I firmly like, well, one, it's been like a joy being on this panel and learning so much. And I love that piece around joy, I love that piece around safety. But I also think, right, like, let's be real about like the work on public transit. Like when it started, a lot of it was like, especially me as a Black woman, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that if I was on a bus, I would not be sitting anywhere near anyone else on this panel. Right? So like that's intrinsic to like what public transit has been, right? It's been around advocacy, it's been around civil rights, it's been around how do we make sure that as we're creating these public goods, everyone can benefit from it. So I don't think you have to even think about how you relate the work. I feel like it's really clear and it's really evident. And that's just in its history, but even now today, because even when I was thinking about like, okay, like joy and like, you know, safety, I'll be real, I have 3 kids. I have an 11-year-old, I have a 5-year-old, and I have a 1-year-old. Don't know how that happened, but here I am. And y'all see me, I'm a Black woman. While my husband is not, when people see my kids, they're like, oh yeah, they're like Black kids. And I often think about, especially my 11-year-old, right, who's starting to ride the bus, I think about, I want him to feel safe. I want him to be safe. And I want him to experience joy. And I'm also very aware of how Black bodies are treated, not just on public transit, right? But like we've seen it, whether you're on the street, right? Whether you're like in your home, whether you are jogging, right? These are all cases where Black bodies, like we've had the joy taken from us. And so I think that when we're talking about like environmental justice in this work, it's like, well, what does it look like to make sure that as we're talking about this work, we really are centering those that have the most capacity to be harmed, right? And I think that's really important. I don't know Curtis Green, but he sounds awesome. And his daughter sounds awesome. Granddaughter, right? And I'm assuming that part of what they are also, you know, part of his advocacy, I don't really know. But like I'm gonna Google this when I get home. But I mean, my point is like, I'm assuming part of what they're thinking about is, right, you're thinking about like, well, wait a second, like how do I, in my position, being the first, how am I pushing forward what we've seen as like these inequities across the board? So that's one thing I think you can say really clearly is that I don't think you have to think about how to relate it. I think it's literally just making sure that as you're in these spaces, as you're doing this work, you're really thinking about and looking around and saying like, who's not at the table? Who is being impacted by this that I'm not thinking about? I mean, even when you're thinking about like the lines that are getting cut, like Amanda just said, right? It was like, oh my God, why did I just forget? 74 to 19, yeah, right? Like, what lines were those, right? Who probably got hit by that like doesn't have a car, doesn't have a way, right? And still had to go to work. Anyways, I'm bringing these up because these are all questions that I think are fundamental to the work and completely tie into what we're talking about when we're talking about environmental justice. I also would say that at the state level, we have to be grappling with these questions. I mean, what you're talking about in San Francisco around this cliff, we see it deeply at the state level. And as I pointed out, a huge chunk of our funding is still going towards highways. And so there is a real conversation. And I think I liked your point on don't waste a crisis, right? Like, in my opinion, don't waste a crisis. I absolutely agree. When you're looking at other places that are not as dependent on fares, they're seeing a bigger chunk of the money coming from the state. I mean, I'm a part of the administration, so I won't tell you what to do, but I can definitely, you know, point to, I think there is a real conversation to be had there. And I do think that as, you know, we at the Air Resources Board, I know that Caltrans, the California Transportation Commission, there's a number of state agencies that are involved in this effort. Some of these things we've tried to kick off, right? Like the idea of seamless transit, how do we get like more of a universal, you know, transit pass? It's really challenging to do at the state level because there are so many different challenges at the local and the regional level, and every place looks different. With that said, it doesn't take away from the fact that I think the work that's happening here is really important. And I think if you're always looking at that through the lens of like equity, through the lens of environmental justice, if you're asking the questions around who's not here, who's impacted, how are they impacted, why? I mean, those are fundamental questions that I think will not just again benefit, you know, those groups, but are going to benefit all of us all around.
Thank you so much for that. Amanda, you have the next question here.
Thank you.
All right, how is the SFMTA already innovating to make progress towards the perfect transit scenario you mentioned earlier? And what improvements can transit riders expect in the next year?
I want to say that I'm really, really proud of how Beauty is performing right now at this moment in time. I don't know if you all feel this, I don't know if you've experienced this. When I came on the board 6 years ago, we were in the middle of Van Ness, dragging on, we're in the middle of Central Subway, dragging on. Kind of morale was kind of low, I was like, oh my God, these projects are gonna be finished. And they're both done, and our numbers, I don't know if you all know these numbers. But based on some innovations, based on some of the projects that have been finished, I could argue that Beauty is performing at its best level in the decades right now. Like maybe in my entire lifetime, probably in a lot of your entire lifetime, we're like having a very special moment right now. And I'm honestly feeling very protective of the progress we have made and the way that the teams have innovated to get us to where we are right now. So I just want to throw out like a couple examples of that, okay? We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary of Muni Forward. Muni Forward is a sort of a comprehensive approach to put in street design changes, signal prioritization, red carpet lanes, bus bulbs, all kinds of like tweaks to our streets to make Muni faster and more efficient and really reach the vision of the transit priority network. So we've put out 100 miles of transit priority improvements in the city, including 75 miles of transit only lanes. Like, how good does it feel when you're on the bus and you just fly past all the traffic? It's just the best feeling. Like, it keeps happening. I'm just getting all these anecdotes of people like, oh, I missed my stop again on Van Ness, that bus is going so fast. Or like, oh my God, I'm 20 minutes early to my thing because the 38 hours is so fast right now. And I don't know about all of you, but I've had over the years, because I'm affiliated with Muni, this sort of like, oh, Muni, Muni. My injury got stuck in the tunnel again. And what happens to me now is I'm not even joking, this is not even a story that I'm making up, this is true. That I was like preparing for some, I don't know, hearing or something, at 9:30 at night, my neighbor knocks on my door and he's like, I'm like, what's up? He said, I just started taking the 38, all right, I had it so fabulous. It was like on time, it was clean, it was fast, it didn't stop at all. And I'm like, there's something happening here. When like that is what's happening, I don't get groaning, I don't get complaining, I get like people going like, 22 Fillmore is crushing it right now. Like, I only like 6 minutes and it just, there's always a buzz. So this is not like happening by accident. This is happening as a result of like very, very hard innovative work on behalf of the transit team. I just want to help you to understand that. So one is the transit priority improvements that we've made. And I'm telling you, like, these are coming at the board in rapid succession. It's like the 29R Muni Forward. So you asked what we can expect in the next couple years. 29R Muni Forward project. We just approved the Kate Ingleside Muni Forward project, and Ocean View Muni Forward project. El Terrible is finally going to open on September 28th. I hope you'll come out to the ribbon cutting, because my gosh, that's been a journey. I don't know if you all know like recovery numbers, if you're all really familiar with this, but of course we're always tracking month by month by month. How are we recovering? Are we going to recover? So overall, I think we're at about 77% pre-pandemic ridership on the system, but with some unbelievable exceptions, okay? The 49 Van Ness is at 140% of pre-pandemic ridership because of the improvements made on that corridor. But 22 Fillmore is like 130% or something because it's running fast, because we put in transit priority treatments along those routes. So what we're seeing is where we are investing in these transit priority improvements, ridership is coming back with a vengeance, and that's really, really exciting to see. A second thing, and I don't know about all of you, Janelle, you said you have kids who ride transit. I don't know if you remember sort of, there was a phase we were going through, it was a lot of bunching and gapping. And how incredibly frustrating when like you wait for 20 minutes and you see two buses kind of flying along. You're like, oh, come on, we gotta be able to do better than that. And my kids would come on and they'd be like, bus bunching is the most annoying thing. Like they know it, they get it. So it's because we were using fixed schedules, and then the operators were trying to stick to their schedules. We have totally shifted the way we're managing that to a phrase called headway management, which is just to keep the buses spaced. It's more important, much more important to keep the buses spaced out from one another than to be at the stop at 8:10, right? not many people plan to take the 8:13 bus from McAllister and Baker. They want to walk up and they want to just not wait very long and get on the bus. And so the shift to headway management, that was an innovation really that came from the operators. That has meant so much more reliable service than attacking head-on, that sort of bunching and gapping, which is just a much better way to spread out the service. And then I also just want to talk about the maintenance crews, because these are amazing, hardworking people that do not get a lot of glamour, they do not get a lot of spotlight. But I'm telling you, I got a chance to go deep into Lombardo station with some of these folks during one of our fix-it weeks. The maintenance team has really embraced preventative maintenance. Let's get ahead of some of these things so they never break in the first place. So let's really get out and spot the challenges. And because we've embraced preventative maintenance, those delays that I was telling you about, a friend of mine raged like, oh, the train's not gonna try this all again. Those delays are down really significantly. I don't know if you all know this or you've experienced it, but like some of our longer delays are down like 75% from 2019 from pre-pandemic, and our moderate delays are down like 65%. So it's pretty fun to see the like bar chart of that. You're just like boom, 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 and then there's like tiny little bars over here. You're like, what happened? What did we do? Was it we embraced preventative maintenance? That was an innovation on behalf of the team. So I am just so incredibly proud of the transit team and what has been happening. And in terms of some of the innovations coming, we are going to get to the credit card payment. I don't have a specific date for it. Was hoping it was gonna be this year. I was January, it was gonna be this year, but there has been a little bit of a delay. But just that seamless payment, I don't know if you all have noticed the displays at the transit stops are like a lot clearer, they're a lot better, they're a lot more reliable. Like we are in a mode of continuous improvement, which is why it is so important to keep doubling down on investing in the system, because we don't want, just like Alma, we don't want to go back. Like, we don't want to go back to how things work. We're in a great moment now. We're gonna keep building on this, keep prioritizing our street space for transit to match that vision of transit first, and just make sure that basically Muni is the fastest, most frequent, most reliable way to get around, always.
No, I agree. I have noticed that. So thank you for that. Anecdotally, if anybody wants to know, the reason I started riding my bike to and from work is because the El Taraval used to get stuck in the tunnel right at Forest Hill. And it's like a dead zone. There's no cell service and nobody knows what's happening, right? So it could take, it was used to, like something that should take 20 or 30 minutes took like 50 minutes to an hour. And I was like, this is nuts. So I have actually really noticed it hit the connections also when you connect to trains and buses. Within minutes, your connecting bus or train is like there. The Vanis VRT, I do have a story about that. When it first went in, my husband and I made a reservation for dinner on Polk Street. We live out in the Sunset. And I was like, oh, we get to ride the new VRT. It's already set up and ready to go. We were literally there 30 minutes early because normally it would take us like 45 minutes, depending on, when the buses came and the trains in the tunnel. So yes, I think those things are absolutely working. I know sometimes it feels anecdotal, right? When you're a bus rider, but it is happening and we are really seeing it systemically happening. So that's great.
Can I just say one more thing connected to Chanel? Because Chanel was talking about highways and divided communities. Of course, Geary Boulevard was one of those investments that really divided communities and essentially like laid down an expressway in the middle of the city, which is just like outrageous as part of this whole urban renewal phase. The 38 Geary Rapid Transit Improvement Project, what we're doing with these projects is not just putting down the red carpet for transit, which is amazing, but there's also a pedestrian safety aspect to these projects because, of course, most people walk to get to the transit stops. We have to think about the whole user experience. And at the ribbon cutting for that 38R project, I got to meet a man who is blind, who lives south of Geary, and he works as a priest in a church that's to the north of Geary. And because of the improvements that we made to pedestrian safety and crossing, he was able to like walk to his job safely by himself for the first time ever. And that's part of like reconnecting communities that I think is just like so inspiring, motivating, and like undoing some of the harms of the past.
Yeah, props to that. It is about, I think I said this at the new 30 stop in the Presidio. I don't know if you guys saw that in the news, that Presidio Trust and SFMTA work together, put a stop there. It does serve the Chinatown community, families very specifically that need outdoor space and to be in nature in a national park, right? It's amazing. But I did make the statement that if you make transit efficient, accessible, people will ride it. People will get on it instead of getting in their cars or taking a ride hail or dare I say, the autonomous vehicle to get there, right? To be more efficient and to get access. I know, just building arena. They're not recording it, I hope. But no, that's real, like, right? I think that that's a very important aspect of it is creating connections for people. So, okay, the next part of our programming is about Q&A. So we have some questions that people submitted here. I think I'm just gonna do that. And then I think Dylan has some cards of people had questions that they had written down that they'd like me to ask. Go ahead and pass them up or hand them to Dylan right here. Perfect. And panelists, it is essentially kind of like a free for all. So if an answer compels you or comes to you in a burning way and you want to share, please, we have enough time and certainly enough questions to do that.
While you're gathering, so are there people also on Zoom too?
There are some, I think.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah, there are a couple people
Okay.
on Zoom too. Okay, perfect. Oh. All right. Okay, I'm gonna start here from the top. This is from Franz K and Andrew. What can I do as a citizen to better help build the transit system we need in the Bay? Are there levers at the local and state level that are being overlooked?
I'm happy to start us
Yes.
off.
Please.
Okay, a couple thoughts here. So when you have opportunities to vote for measures that would give more money to transit, don't just vote for them to get involved in the campaigns. And get involved, you're already here, you're with transit riders, that's fantastic. Make sure that people know about those, spread the word about those. Yes, I think you have opportunities, there are overlooked opportunities at the state level. And one of these opportunities I wanna make sure people understand is that the money that California gets from the federal government for highways and roads is eligible to be flexed to public transportation. This is a big deal and has not yet reached its potential. All across all 50 states, this is possible, but I think like the high watermark of any state flexing those dollars is like 10% maybe. Most states are not flexing those dollars. So our state leaders have a lot more flexibility than they'd like you to know to put those monies to transit. And I think we really need to push hard and take advantage of this crisis to like question some of the way we've always done things, which have harmed communities and worse with our climate situation, to flex some of those funds away. And then the last thing I'll say is that when some of those transit priority improvements that I spoke about that make the bus run faster, but also this is really important. When the bus runs faster, when the bus doesn't have to sit in traffic, we can run more service for the same amount of money. Like it literally wastes public dollars in a criminal way when the bus has to sit stuck in traffic. So that is not just deeply satisfying to get to your dinner reservation 30 minutes early, it's actually it's like allowing government to deliver services more cost effectively when we don't have the bus sitting in traffic. And yet, these projects are not without controversy. There was a lot of complaints about the Geary transit project that I was telling you about, which simply sought to give a little bit of space on the street for transit. And so we'd love to invite all of you to stand up and fight for street space given to transit. And that is how we're going to deliver on this vision. And more often than not, we hear about people who are angry that driving space or parking space is being taken away for transit. I would love to invite you, Franz and Andrew and all of you, to please come to our hearings and stand up and write blogs and write op-eds and talk to your neighbors about why the equitable and inclusive thing to do is to give a portion of our street space to transit.
I agree. I wanted to mention, Amanda, that when the Geary Expressway went in, they ripped out the B Geary streetcar line, which was the busiest streetcar line by a wide margin. You know, they had 50 streetcars on that one line back in the 50s, and they wanted a wide, almost freeway. And we've been fighting for a long time to get a subway, which it certainly justifies. And I'll give you an example of advocacy that's successful or not. I was the chair of the first Citizens Advisory Committee to the TA, and my good friend and current board chair, Carmen Clark, was helping run the TA back then. And it was a big decision after Prop B was passed in 1989, I think it was Prop B, that they were gonna study two corridors, Third Street and Geary, for subway. And they had enough money to study both, but they only had enough money to build one. And what happened was that the Richmond district had a couple of people who are still around, one in particular, who was, you know, shouting bloody murder.
Names, come on.
Not naming names.
They did not, you know, don't you dare, I want my diagonal parking. And then you had, not the most persuasive member from that supervisorial district on the CAC, wonderful woman. But same time, Third Street had a coordinated effort saying this is a matter of environmental justice, of equity. We don't have any light rail, you know, we're right through the Bayview, Hunters Point, Miss Valley, where I live. I didn't live then, so there was no conflict. And so what happened was that you ended up with, the decision being made, and I believe it was because of citizen advocacy and opposition, not the actual merit of the two lines, because by any standard, a Geary subway would be doing 3 or 4 times the ridership of the central subway. No disrespect to the central subway, but you know, that's the busiest corridor in town, and we still don't have it. So for everyone who wants to advocate, just remember, you've got to be patient, you've got to be persistent. It's not enough just write one note and say, there, I did it. You got to go through the whole thing. I'll look at people like Chris Harvin and Kat Siegel and all the people who are involved in Prop L, who thought this up out of the whole cloth. They said, yeah, we're going to get some money. We're going to get some money from those rideshare companies. And I think it's going to pass. And I think, you know, it's a brilliant idea, and that's citizen driven. And anybody in this room is capable of participating, helping lead, and making it happen.
I would definitely agree with that. I like that, right? Anybody is capable. One of the things that I would say is, so Amanda's absolutely right around the flexing of funds, right? So I think that's one of the things, but she's also right that there is a ton of resistance to that. I think that all of you are lucky that your senator, so if you looked at me like on my phone, I was Googling, make sure I was right, is Scott Wiener. He is a fierce advocate in the legislature. And so that is one way, if you're thinking about like, wait a second, like how do we address some of the things around this financial cliff? What are some options that we can do? I would absolutely recommend, I mean, worked with this office in the past, they're always hungry for ideas and they're always willing to push on that front. And I absolutely think that that's one of the things that we do need. So I would say that there's also a number of efforts at the state level. And part of what is challenging, I think, for us at the state level is figuring out how do we get to the local level to pull you in a way that is not extractive or taxing. But there are a number of like state programs where we are giving out funding and it's been really hard to get to the local level. I think the takeaway that I'm getting today is part of it is that how are we partnering, right, with local organizations, and really thinking through what that looks like to make sure that those are, you know, clear and available. There's a number of things that like Caltrans is doing, that we at their resources board are doing, that really do get to some of the things that we're talking about again on that seamless trans at the state level, that it'd be great to have feedback on. And I think our challenge has been like, how do we go beyond who knows how to reach us to really get to those who haven't really had the opportunity? And so I think that's it's a great place to continue to partner with you, Janelle, as well as panelists on this panel. That felt redundant, I'm gonna go with that anyways.
No, that's applicable. And yes, there is just in case anybody works for a nonprofit organization that could qualify for funding. I believe that your CARB is currently taking applications for projects around air pollution. Yeah, anything that helps with local
We're-
communities. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have, I mean, I was like, I have a whole list of career programs. I know we're only on question one, so I'm sorry in advance. But we have one for particularly on air pollution, like we have it's like almost $16 million to give out in funding. We have our STEP program, which is our sustainable transportation equity, which is again, community driven. I'm rushing a bit because I realize that we're only on question one, but my point here is that I think we do have a lot of funding opportunities and desperately want to give that money out.
Okay. This is from Alice. What role do other regional transit agencies play in bringing San Francisco to a transit-first future? And what roles does San Francisco play in bringing the region to a transit-first future? Maria probably, yeah. I know, it's a.
And Martin and I are silently chuckling here. Yeah, this is something we're doing in front of the camera and behind the camera. Is, you know, everything in the city really depends on the regional transit systems working well and seamlessly with community. Y'all know that. The regional transit operators that serve us with the greatest number of riders, of course, our BART, and then Caltrain, also Gold Great EP Transit. They have a lot more diverse voices that are perhaps not as transit friendly in their districts that they serve, and it's a little bit more challenging. So without rambling on too much, we are having hearings, like I mentioned Tuesday, bringing the operators to talk about their issues and making sure our board appreciates how important they are in connecting and taking everybody, because we know you travel where you want to go, you don't care where the county line is, you just gotta get there. And we are facilitating conversations behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, all the way down to our friends in Santa Clara and San Mateo, who have BART stations or future BART stations within our part of the BART district. So I'll just stop there.
Yeah, that's.
Do you wanna do that one?
I will just say mine really quickly and then hand it over to Amanda. So one of the things that I would say is that we do a fair amount of work with the regions. We do have regional greenhouse gas reduction targets that each region, right, we set them, the regions have to work to meet them. It is, and you can see the fatigue on my face only because we're in the target, it's called the target setting process. We're in that process right now. And it is generally a battle, but what I would say is this, is that, so your regional, regional agencies, MTC, Metropolitan Transportation Commission. I have been really impressed with San Francisco because I think maybe it was Maria or Amanda, somebody said it, you're constantly pushing the region in terms of what can happen, which makes our job at the Air Resources Board easier when we're saying, hey, we think you can get another 1 to 2% out of what you're doing. And I think they generally do look at what San Francisco is doing, and that really helps set the tone, at least from what we hear at the state in terms of the regional work. So I just wanted to say that it's been really helpful. And again, I know things aren't perfect in San Francisco, but even across the state, you really are leading in a lot of the work that you're doing on that front. And it really does help us to push the other regions.
Maybe we just go to another question.
Sure.
We can get through.
Yeah. There are a number. So this is from Finn. Which is more important? Improving transit or making car use less convenient? Amanda knows it's like my favorite thing.
I'm happy to take a shot at that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I want to introduce Finn in the room. Is Finn willing to raise your hand?
I don't know.
Okay. Maybe a remote. Okay. It's a great question. I think the way that I think about it is that right now in San Francisco, we have these really clear values. We're a very values-driven city, and I think it's like why a lot of people love to come here and why we love to be here, right? We like to be welcoming to all different kinds of people, no matter who you are, no matter who you love, no matter what you like to do, you are welcome. You can find your home here in San Francisco, and that's just like part of our DNA. And it's like why I love to be here. And so we are inclusive and we focus on equity and we celebrate diversity in the city, okay? The problem is right now, our streets don't do that. Our streets don't match those like deeply, deeply held values. In some places they do, like we're starting to, but overwhelmingly, our streets are not that diverse. Most of our streets mostly prioritize people driving their cars or parking their cars. That's like mostly what they do. They are not inclusive, they are not welcoming to all people when you feel, as a person riding a bike or rolling on a one wheel, like you are literally marginalized. You sometimes feel harassed, intimidated, or worse, injured, or very worse, killed, walking or biking or scooting or in a wheelchair. Okay, that is like the opposite of an inclusive, welcoming street. And they're not equitable. Again, overwhelmingly, the street space is dedicated to moving and parking private vehicles. Even though we like to think of ourselves as a climate leadership city, and we are recognized, we're part of international climate networks, we are recognized as San Francisco as a climate leader, and we say by our climate plan, our friends at SF Environment say by 2030, 80% of all trips in San Francisco should be walking, biking, or transit or sustainable trips. And we're at like 40 something, maybe 50% right now. So the project we have to engage in right now, I think, is to align our streets with our values and our goals. And that is how I think about it. It's like we have to make our streets welcoming and inclusive to all modes of travel, not overwhelmingly one mode of travel, which by the way, you know, a third of San Francisco households don't own a vehicle at all. And probably way more people than that, if you think about youth and you think about people who are not able to drive, way more than a third don't have the ability to drive. And so our streets just have to really like get modernized and caught up to where we are and where we're trying to go.
Thank you.
Anyone else wanna?
I would agree 100,000% with everything you say, but I think the effect of that is you're making transit better. And as the mom of 2 teenagers, I can tell you, making their life miserable does nothing to motivate change. Making something I want them to be very attractive, appealing, that works. So that I think it's back to something Rick was saying about public comment. If you're riding transit and it's good, tell your friends, tell their friends' friends, because they hear it from you that it's good, it works, it's safe, I feel comfortable. That gets them over there, not trying to guilt them into doing it.
Bye, Chanel.
Bye, Chanel. Sorry. Yes. I mean, a mom of 3. I mean, I have 2. I can't even imagine having the bustle of life. So thank you. Yes. So this next question is from Russell. This actually kind of goes to your last statement there, Maria, about public comment. What is the best way to balance community input into the planning process without allowing a vocal minority to halt needed transit improvements?
Should I start on that? Okay. To me, this is about getting really, really clear on where the decision space is and is not on our projects. Our mission is to connect San Francisco with a safe, sustainable, equitable, and affordable transportation system. And so there are certain things that we just have to do in order to reach that mission. Like some of the street safety improvements that we have to make, I want to say we have to do those things. That is our mission, that is our mandate. It's not a question of whether we're going to make the streets safer. So I just feel like it's incumbent upon us to get very clear, like, we're going to do this. The decision space is which streets are best for the bike network? Which amenities do we need to make sure the transit system accesses best? Which types of facilities do you feel most safe biking and scooting on? Like there are meaningful opportunities for input, but that what we're not going to accept is input that is, don't do this. Don't do anything. And just making very clear how we feel that we need in order to be part of delivering on a culture of caring, we have to deliver certain things or we're fundamentally failing at our mission. I find that to be a much more respectful posture towards public outreach, is just getting really clear. This is a decision that you can help to make as the public, and also getting really clear about roles, you know, who's the decision maker, who is consulted, who is an advisor. I don't know if all of you in your workplace have gone through these like maddening matrix exercises about roles, But I also think that's really, really important to remember that, okay, so the MTA board is the decision maker on something. The public is being consulted when we want your input, but in order to deliver on our mission, there are certain things that we're gonna have to do, and we really can't compromise on. How you going?
But still, please make public comment. I know Amanda hears a lot, but it's a very important process. I know it can feel like it's daunting and it drags out the process, but our voices need to be heard, and I think it's important for people to know that, especially in San Francisco, we have diverse residents that have different needs, and maybe that minority voice is not the majority. And so it's really important to still participate. Great, okay. Oh, this is my favorite one. So excited about this one. Will it ever be possible to provide free transit for San Francisco residents? Come on.
Yes, I'm gonna take that one. Who wants to take that one?
All right, I'll take it.
Okay, let's talk about numbers. Okay, let's really talk about numbers. Maria said that in FY '26, we have a deficit that's between 200, and I actually think it's up to 320 million in order to provide our service. So right now, we get over $100 million a year from transit fares. So it's just beyond comprehension right now to think about free transit, because do we want a $400 million deficit that we're facing? Before the pandemic, we were getting over $200 million a year from transit fares. And so we're very, very eager for people to return to transit and keep riding, and so we can get more and more of that revenue. But it's a very important, before the pandemic, it was about 1/5 of our budget came from transit fares. Now, if I read studies that said transit fares are the reason people don't take transit, I would be very interested in a conversation about making transit free. But all the studies I've read, and I'd love to hear what you all have read, say the number one reason people don't take transit more is because it's not fast enough, it's not frequent enough, or it's not reliable enough. Those are the ways that you help people ride transit. So for most people, the fare is not burdensome, that is not the barrier. For some people, it is, and that's very fair, and that's very important. And we spend about $25 million a year subsidizing transit fares. So in some cases, we give a completely free fare to youth, which I actually love, because my kids just kept losing their Clipper cards. It's so much easier to have free transit. In some cases, we get discounted fares, and we are aware of the paperwork burdens that we're getting in the way of people accessing those lifeline fares. We're working to make those much more accessible. So I think where the fare is burdensome, let's address that challenge more surgically. But for many, many, many people, the fare is not burdensome. It is not the barrier. And for many people, they're choosing between like, well, maybe I'll take the $250 transit ride, or maybe I'll take like a $10 or $15 like Uber or Lyft ride. And so it's not about the fare that's the problem. For them, subsidizing them to ride transit for free might actually be something that people don't even really even think about. It doesn't even register. So like in a world where we have just literally an unlimited tap of funding, we can just turn it on and print money. And we've built out our entire system of 5-minute only and signal prioritization. And we've restored all the vehicles. I mean, we've done everything else. Like, then I'm happy to talk about free transit. But right now, it is just so far from the top of the list, and I actually think it's quite fiscally irresponsible to talk about free transit right now, because the effect of that actually would just be to wipe out, would be making the MTA board make like heartbreaking decisions about cutting beloved transit line after beloved transit line after beloved transit line to do what? To give people for whom fare is not burdensome a free ride. So I feel very strong. I'm fascinated. This is your favorite question.
It is, because I believe that there's a way that our city and county can invest to get us there. I don't want to call it free, but I think that there is a way in which we can create. I think it's more like the college, the SF state model, where we do a subsidized, it's a universal travel card. You can use it on BART, you can use AC Transit, you can use Muni, and really funding should come from the state in a huge way.
So after you solved our deficit permanently for the municipal
Solve that.
and Lawrence and Caltrans and all the other 27 agencies.
Right.
Crystal stuff, and we made all the mini improvements, like, let's chat.
Yeah, no, I think it requires a mind shift. I mean, like a holistic view of transit in the state of California really needs to come from, like Marie said, the state government. We need to have funding directly from them to really do that. In order to do that, I think we need to change a lot of folks' mindset, especially in the legislators at the state level, about how important public transportation is, whether you're going from Los Angeles to San Francisco or within each city. So,
And I think we're gonna need to do all
I know,
of
I'm gonna
that
be
in order
100.
to survive and thrive.
right.
And people still pay for it.
So kind of both of you, that, just the math, I'm trying to raise the amount of money to cover the fare gap is just, it's mind blowing. So personally, I don't think we will ever get there because transportation is so important, but there's also housing and healthcare and all these other choices that we have in terms of what we're subsidizing for the public. And that's why I do completely agree with you. Targeting the discounts or free towards the people who need it the most is so important, but we just can't afford to not take the revenue from the folks who can afford to pay, because we can do more service.
Right. I think we'll get there.
I just have a follow-up question,
Mhm.
which is how do you all think about fare payment enforcement in the context of like fares as part of your budget with the upcoming deficit?
Our chief security officer, Kimberly Burris, oversees the transit fare inspectors, and we've had a lot of dialogue with her about leading with empathy and leading with care and leading with education as part of the enforcement. So part of what the transit fare inspectors carry around is information about how you can purchase. So it's not meant to be punitive. It's like, if you're caught and you haven't paid, it is like, here's how you buy a monthly transit pass and let us help you do that. And we're not quite there yet, but like my dream, my vision is that instead of getting a ticket, like if you're, caught not paying, instead of that, what maybe you get a ticket, but then you can actually transfer your ticket through the website to help cover the cost of your monthly pass. Like, I think that's the best practice for fare enforcement, is about education and about helping people buy those fare products. And most of the time, but for people who have not paid, in some cases, these are people who would qualify for some of our reduced fare products, like our Lifeline products, like a 50% discount. So making sure that they have access to that, which again, that has been complicated to navigate in the past, how to access those kinds of things. But the other thing I'll say about the transit fare inspectors that I feel is really important to say is that having a presence on our vehicles really, really helps with our other goals of people feeling safe riding the bus. That the operator really, really has their hands full, just like safely driving the bus or driving the train. And I don't know if you've been on vehicles, I've been on vehicles where it starts to get tense, somebody's starting to harass someone else and everyone's like, what should we do? What should we do? It's too much for the operator to sort of like stop what they're doing and address the situation. So having additional presence on the vehicle can also help to sort of diffuse potentially upsetting situations.
I think sometimes the fare collection mechanism plays a role here too. I was in Toronto last week riding streetcars, and they take credit
That's
cards.
all off-brand for
I
you.
was amazed. I mean, they take credit cards. And you pay a little more if you do a credit card. There's no discounts for seniors. But it's so easy. And every streetcar and bus has, tags at every door. Everyone must tag on. There's no, oh, I have a transfer, I have a paper transfer, I have this, I have that, so I don't need to do that. Everybody has to tag on every bus. And the system, their Clipper card, picks, automatically, when you tag on the first time, says, okay, you got 2 hours. And if you get off and get on another vehicle, you gotta tag again, but you don't get charged again if it's within that 2 hours. So they got it worked out. And I think maybe it's Canadian nice, it's part of this too,
No.
but all of these folks, I mean, people pay attention to other people tagging on. I never saw anybody not tag for what that's worth. And there's no cash in the system at all.
Right. So we're at the time, but so I want to give the panelists an opportunity, just some like lasting thoughts, just a few words about transit or anything you feel like to the audience before we close out.
Well, I'd like to say we've got big decisions to make. The state has told us we have to build 80,000 some housing units. And boy, I'll put my money down, that's not gonna happen. I mean, I live down in Little Hollywood where we had 10,000 units going up in Candlestick, 1,000 in Schleglock, 10,000 in, Hunters Point. How's that working out? And Port Merced, I mean.
Don't forget executive.
An executive.
They're approved for a whole bunch of
Yeah,
buildings that nobody
That's
talks
right.
about.
I mean, and those areas are rich for housing. They have the T-line already. But before we plan any more transit lines, before we draw any more lines on maps and say, oh, we gotta build out to the Presidio under Lombard Street, can we zone for 30-story towers on Lombard Street? Can we build them? Can we do the same thing? We can't build the Presidio, so, can we build, if we do Geary 19th, the whole area that we ripped up.
Yep.
I mean, Cathedral Hill and around Japantown, I mean, there's so much space, not park space, but we have the opportunity. But before we go decide, well, let's build a subway there, let's make sure that we can build tens of thousands of units of housing for people to ride and not have cars. So that's the biggest decision I think the city faces in the next 10 years.
Maria?
Maybe two things if I can remember real quick. What is it? Not Chanell. And on the state level, I keep feeling that the state keeps looking at the Bay Area, like you guys keep raising your own taxes, sales tax, whatever, and paying for transit. We don't need to do anything, not our problem. Be loud, especially young people. Like we care about climate, our economy, everything. The state has all these goals. We cannot meet those goals without transit. They need to be contributing along with us, but they need to hear that loud and clear. And the other one I'm gonna say is probably gonna send Tyler up to my little today, because I dropped off my eldest at college. All right, now it's a drama to get there. But one thing for me that transit has always been, when I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, I didn't actually drive anywhere, but I couldn't go anywhere because there's no transit where I went. But when I came out here, it was like this whole amazing world where, anyway, it was just amazing. The trip from the airport, I was like, this is so cool. But part of me, what I think is so cool about transit, and it's part of the secret, I think, to making transit like this cool thing that everyone does, is you need to have a sense of community and respect for your fellow people who you are with. Because ultimately, I think that's why some people in their cars don't, a little bubble. They don't want to mix with other people. It's not cool, but it's also sad. I run into the coolest people, cool pets. Some of them are supposed to be on board, But anyway, just spread that with your grandparents, your friends, your neighbors, your bosses, and the more people who hear that when people are doing it, I think that's part of the magic elixir we need.
Thank you.
Okay, closing statements. There's so much to say. Okay, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say, I believe we in the Bay Area are really, really privileged, especially in San Francisco, to have one of the most engaged populations, civically engaged populations of like any city in America. I actually ran a project with Bloomberg Philanthropies that Janelle mentioned. We work with 25 other cities around the country. And like, it's so different other places. Like there'll be like 3 groups that go to the city council hearings. They're like, oh, that's so cute. They're great. 8,000 people. But I love it. I really, really love it that you all care so much and that you have ideas, you have innovations, you bring your own unique perspectives, and I want to hear them. I really truly believe in the wisdom of crowds to solve our problems. I don't think it's like a small number of people at the top of agencies that have all the answers. I think it's like everybody has the answers. So one thing I want to invite you to is into dialogue with me. You can come to City Hall at the first and third Tuesday of the month when we have our meeting at 1 o'clock in room 400. But I also created virtual office hours on Mondays at 4 o'clock. the first and third Mondays of the month. You can join by Microsoft Teams and just like share your ideas, share your observations, share your perspectives. Because I really do believe our North Star as Uni is the customer experience. That is the right North Star, and that is sort of where we have pivoted and evolved. And I think that's part of why we've made so much progress. And so especially, I'm just gonna go ahead and assume you're all Uni lovers. I really realize, so you're this sort of rarefied group that we're sitting in this room with tonight. Really matters to me how you experience Uni. And if you feel a sense that your government cares about you when you ride transit, or if there's times when you don't. And specifically, like, what made you feel like cared for and you had a good customer experience? And what made you feel like, today, like, I really didn't feel so good? Or we really, really, really want to hear those things and rapidly evolve and iterate and continuously improve, because it matters so much, obviously, for the health of the agency, but also that all of you have a good experience when you travel on our system. So that's like one closing thing I want to say about getting engaged. Because I'm sitting here with my MTA hat on, I cannot say the other things I want to say about the November election, but if you come to my office hours, potentially we could talk about some of the ballot measures that are on the November ballot, which are very consequential, and I'd love to talk to you more about those. Thank you again for being here, and thank you for being Uni lovers, who are such important members of this community. We love you.
Thank you. Give them a round of applause. No, thank you guys so much. The questions were amazing. I think the staff were a little concerned we wouldn't have enough questions, but I have stacks. So we'll give that away to like maybe answer some of the ones that didn't get answered this evening in an efficient way. What's that? What's that? Oh, Rick, sorry. No.
Well, he started.
Oh, yeah, he started.
No, I was
He started.
gonna say,
Go ahead.
in closing, let's all have some joy this weekend.
Yeah.
It's Community Heritage
Transit,
Weekend.
yeah.
By the way, was the man who brought the F line to reality, an MTA engineer, wonderful man. I'm glad they named it after the street after him. And we're gonna have 12 or more vintage vehicles as old as, wait for it, 128 years, 141 years old. And for you younger folks, we have a 25-year-old bus. Probably rode as teenagers. So, it's all good. It's all San Francisco transit history, and most of the rides, by the way, are free.
Yes. Yeah, there's lots of Transit Month events, so I will close with just a few thoughts. So thank you guys so much this evening. It's tons of knowledge, tons of information. I hope that you guys got a lot out of this. And since Amanda could not say this officially, I can say this as the executive director of the San Francisco Transit Riders. There is a current ballot measure on the ballot for November called Proposition L. It is to raise operating dollars for Muni and to help with the deficit. It is not going to solve the problem. We have a lot more work to do there, but it is a start in the right direction. It is a gross receipts tax on ride hail and autonomous vehicle companies that operate here in San Francisco. It plans to generate, according to the controller's office, about 25 million per year. And there's no ending, there's no sunset to it. So it will produce that amount of money as we go along every year from now until whenever. So the organization has an endorsement for yes on Prop L. And so we encourage you guys all, when you get your ballots, to mark yes for Proposition L to help fund transit here in San Francisco. It's just one piece of the plan. We will have, there are lots of other pieces that need to be done, but it's an important measure that we do need to get passed here in the city. So I just want to plug that. Number two, thank you guys so much. I know some of you are members, some of you are not, but the San Francisco Transit Riders is an advocacy organization. We run on membership. So this evening is brought to you by lots of our sponsors during the month, because this is Transit Month, but also from our membership dollars as well. It allows the staff and I to be here this evening and provide this panel for you all. So we appreciate you. And if you guys have any questions, we're going to spend a little time here to socialize, and if there's any food or cookies left, to eat some of those up. So thank you guys so much for being here this evening, and we appreciate it. Thank you.